dev rundown of not only the thesis, but sort of a guide for what did early DeFi look like on Ethereum and what can you expect on Bitcoin, and how do we sort of see this emerge, and also kind of going through our thesis for why DeFi on a slower chain actually is much better and more optimized, which we can even kind of get into here if you want.
Yeah, that's the SlowFi thesis,
yeah,
right?
that's our SlowFi thesis, exactly.
Yeah,
Right,
the DeFi
right.
Bible site is great because of the Galaxy
Yeah,
campaign that takes you through all that too, and really understanding, like giving you a whole quiz, like 20 questions, digging in, really makes you dig into this and understand it a lot better. And that's I was kind of, I hadn't heard that SlowFi thesis before either. So
that's our own creation. You know, from our perspective, like we want testnet users to obviously have some sort of, we wanted them to have some sort of incentive, of course, but at the same time, like education and understanding exactly how this works. Like we don't need, you know, we didn't do this to try and get, you know, an army of people who are just going to leave when the protocol launches, right? We want people who understand and have used the protocol to be able to be the early adopters of the protocol. And if you look at any other, you know, booming ecosystem, all the early adopters are the ones who had most of the most success. So yeah, so the SlowFi thesis I can kind of get into here a little bit, which is basically just says like, okay, DeFi doesn't inherently require high throughput. In fact, the core elements of DeFi that make it successful is liquidity and security, right? Exit velocity, as it says right here, actually generally kills DeFi protocols. Why? Because a huge portion of DeFi protocols involve staking or farming, places where you don't want to be able to claim for basically no money your rewards every 10 seconds, right? You want exit friction. You want a lot of the ability for a lot of liquidity to flow in and friction for it to exit. You want incentive to stay staked. Like let's go back to when in trading on something like Ethereum, right? When ETH was expensive, they optimized Ethereum to actually make it better. But actually, when they did that, Ethereum's DeFi market cap went down significantly. Why is that the case? At some points, I remember paying over $100 for an Ethereum.
I know, right? That was crazy, man. Oh.
Yeah, it was. Yes, it was crazy. But at the same time, you're not going to make a transaction unless you think you're going to be able to make money, right? That is sort of the psychological result of an expensive mainnet. Is that what happens? If it's going to cost me $100 to make a transaction, I'm not going to make a transaction unless I feel like I can for sure make that money back and then some, right? So it prioritizes high value transactions. It also incentivizes you, if you're within a DeFi ecosystem, to stay within that ecosystem and potentially to grow, for that ecosystem to be able to grow. So high exit velocity. And again, you can look, Solana's never had really, has never really had a big DeFi boom. Any of these hyperscale chains that have launched have never really had big DeFi booms because it's extremely cheap to be able to do anything, and you could do everything so fast. The only things that really thinking about it, the only things that really require high throughput are payments, perp dexes, like perp trading, or like meme coin trading. These are sort of the three things that are way more optimized on a fast chain. But lending does not require high throughput. It requires liquidity and security. Staking or yield farming or high value swaps even don't require. Let's just say I wanted to get $1 million worth of a stock off of a stock market, right? I can't do that in 10 seconds, right? It will take me much longer than 10 minutes for me to be able to recognize my profits. You know, there's friction in the traditional finance world for a reason, because friction keeps liquidity within that system. And so Bitcoin has this built-in friction, not only with the block size, which is a benefit, but also the speed of the chain. And so it's actually, in our opinion, it's really the best environment, I think, for DeFi. And then on top of that, you have the decentralized nature of Bitcoin itself. It really is the best chain for this activity to really happen. So that's sort of our SlowFi thesis, a little bit broken down for you.
Gotcha, man. Yeah. So, you know, when I'm taking a look through the Bitcoin DeFi Bible, I want to also be able to, you know, just touch on the other websites that are important for anyone watching who wants to be able to learn more and operate on OPNet. And so I've got DeFi Bible here. Give us a couple of other sites here, Chad.
Yeah. Okay. So of course, like you definitely want to be familiar with MotoSwap. You want to have OP Wallet downloaded. It's a Chrome extension. It will be on the Apple Store and the Google Play Store as well for mobile versions. That's something that you for sure want to have. That is sort of your entrance to. You don't have to bridge anywhere. You're only on Bitcoin, but this is the wallet to use to start out with. Obviously, other wallets and stuff will eventually support this activity as well, but this is the wallet to use. So get familiar with this interface and get familiar with MotoSwap, trading there. Use vibecode.finance not only to be able to participate in the competition that's being run right now, but also to explore some of these applications that are being built, because that's really, that will also give you an edge. You can test a lot of these applications out there are on testnet right now. So you can go and test these applications, see which ones you like, see which ones you think might be really solid, see which ones might provide value to the market, see which ones you might be really interested in using yourselves. And one, you'd be supporting those builders by testing their products. And also two, you're going to be able to really learn a lot more about the full kind of emerging ecosystem that's going to come out starting within a week from today.
Yeah, man, this ecosystem sounds really interesting. So let's say that I want to build some product on OPNet.
Yeah.
How could I potentially monetize that product on OPNet if I wanted to?
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of different ways you can do so. I mean, it sort of depends what you want to do, right? You have the ability to, and this is actually a framing that it's semantic for sure, but it's a framing that I think I want everybody to really understand, because this kind of helps people, I think, really conceptualize what's going on. You're not really building on OPNet. You're building on Bitcoin layer 1 using OPNet, right? OPNet is just the tool that allows you to build on layer 1 Bitcoin. So if I'm building a layer 1 Bitcoin application, what can I make? I can make a DeFi protocol. That DeFi protocol can have its own token if you want. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of tokens that launch, so you can launch your own token. Maybe it's a fee generating token. Maybe it's a DAO token. Maybe it's a staking token. Maybe it's a total shitcoin. Whatever you want to do, you can build. I mean, you could build a game where you have an in-game currency. You can build. Again, there's someone who built invoicing and billing, right? That just takes a fee for the activity that you're doing, right? Just like any other application anywhere in the world. If I want to make an application on the internet, literally today, how would I monetize it? You should think about it the exact same way, except the difference is instead of being paid in fiat currency, you could be paid in Bitcoin for these sort of applications that you're making. And the hosting of these applications is done on Bitcoin layer 1. And users are interacting with your applications through Bitcoin layer 1 transactions, which I think, again, it's definitely a paradigm shift, but there's sort of a limitless amount of things you can make. The question really is, can you build something that the market is interested in or provides value to the market? Does it have product market fit? And that is sort of we're providing the value proposition to everybody, which says it's up to you, the user or the developer, whoever you are. If you have an idea or you're a trader or you're an investor, that you can build anything that you want on Bitcoin now. And if you build something great, then you'll be able to capture value in whichever way that you so choose. If you want that to be through a token, if you want that to be through fees, you can do so.
Wow, man, that's really cool. So something that you said a moment ago caught my attention. You said that it's hosted on the Bitcoin layer 1.
Yeah.
So that must mean that these, I think they're going to be referred to as dApps, basically,
Yes.
right? So
Exactly.
that must mean that these dApps are very lightweight, right? If they can be hosted on the layer 1. So
yeah, the smart contract bytecode is, and this is actually addressing like a huge vector of FUD that's going on right now, which is that we're going to bloat the Bitcoin blockchain. It's actually not true at all.
I hear that from everyone who talks about OPNet.
Yeah, everyone is conflating OPNet's design because they haven't dug into the documentation and a number of different things. A lot of people are traumatized by ordinals, which I understand. Ordinals bloat the Bitcoin blockchain. Why is that the case? Not because they're making transactions. Transactions don't inherently bloat the Bitcoin blockchain. What bloats the Bitcoin blockchain is actually what's called UTXO bloat, which means that we're creating these new UTXOs. Bitcoin as a network, the idea is not, a lot of people don't understand this, but Bitcoin is not, oh, there's 21 million coins and that's how Bitcoin works. No, it's a ledger. So when I'm sending Bitcoin from me to you, I'm not sending you a Bitcoin. I'm destroying a UTXO, -1 to Chad's balance, +1 to David's balance. So
that sounds great, Chad. So, you can do that anytime you want. If you just want to send me 1, 2, 3 Bitcoin, man, you can do that.
Okay, but that's how Bitcoin works.
As long as,
David,
as long as you send me some after. I'm still learning how all this works. So David needs to send me sats.
You need some more experience.
It takes time. It takes time.
Yeah. What Ordinals has done is basically said that your asset is tied to a UTXO. So the bytecode for your JPEG is tied to a UTXO. What does that actually mean? When I create an ordinal inscription, I'm creating a minimum sized UTXO. And when I'm making a 10,000 ordinal collection, I'm creating 10,000 new UTXOs that all have their assets tied to them. When I am creating a BRC20 token, which is like a shitcoin that is made with ordinals, and I have a billion supply of that token, which there are many, many, many of these, I'm creating a billion new UTXOs that the asset that you hold is tied to that UTXO, which means that it bloats the UTXO set. The amount of UTXOs that are in existence are inflating to infinity, basically, every time someone's creating one of these assets, because the assets themselves are tied to UTXOs.
So why does OPNet not do that?
Because we're a smart contract-based protocol. We are not saying that the ownership of your asset is tied to a UTXO. We're saying, just like every other smart contract-based blockchain, the asset itself is a virtual asset within the network. So when I am on Ethereum, for example, and I have a smart contract, I have Tether on Ethereum. I'm not trading a little piece of Ethereum around that says, hey, here's a piece of ETH that has Tether on it. That's not how it works. There's a smart contract that says, here are the rules for the USDT asset on ETH. And I am making a call to that contract when I'm moving my Ethereum around. When I'm moving my USDT around. So the USDT is actually a virtual asset within that system, which allows it to be held by smart contracts and do all this cool programmable stuff. The same thing applies on Bitcoin with OPNet. So when I'm deploying an asset, I'm creating a smart contract, and the actual asset itself is not let's just say I want to put USDT on Ethereum, on Bitcoin. Sorry. I'm creating a mint and burn contract, literally the exact same way I would on ETH. I create a mint and burn contract on Bitcoin. And when someone is moving their USDT around, they are just sending a call to that contract that says, this is where the asset is moving, and it's a virtual asset on Bitcoin.
So it's very lightweight, very lightweight.
Not only is it extremely lightweight, but also all the contract calls. So you might ask, well, okay, so all the assets are not bloating they're not creating these new UTXOs and bloating the blockchain, but what about all the contract calls and all the activity that people are doing? We created these so they are less than they're less than dust limit transactions, which means that the UTXOs themselves can be consolidated by miners, which means that there is no permanent UTXO bloat, because all of the transactions that happen, like the ledger itself is immutable, right? But the existence of these UTXOs, there's all of the smart contract addresses, or what we call anyone can spend addresses, which means that miners themselves can go in as soon as there's enough economic incentive to do so and consolidate all these UTXOs that are the contract calls. And because the ledger is still immutable, the state is still there, right? But the actual existence of the UTXOs can be consolidated into Bitcoin and then spent by miners, so that there is no permanent bloat to the blockchain. It's a super crucial and important difference between, right. Because the concern about ordinals and UTXO bloat is it's super real. Because if I'm running a node and the UTXO set is bloating to infinity, it all of a sudden becomes way more expensive for me. And I'm now using my node as data storage, which is not really what nodes are supposed to be used for. With this system, we're not asking anyone to store data permanently on their nodes. Like, all these transactions are prunable transactions, and they're consolidatable UTXOs, and we're not creating this UTXO bloat. It's a way more efficient system to get way more done, and it doesn't do any damage to BTC. And in fact, the person who gave us this concept and advised us on building this is Luke Dashjr, the guy who is behind BIP110 and Ocean Mining, the leader of all of the ordinals destroys Bitcoin, and they want to fork BTC. That is the guy. We had a multiple hour long consultation with him at our house in Abu Dhabi, where we asked him, hey, listen, you don't want any of this activity on Bitcoin. We completely understand. There's demand for it. We're going to build it. how would we build it in a way that does the least amount of damage to Bitcoin possible, or effectively does no damage to Bitcoin? And he gave us a lot of the protocol design influence that we inevitably built into OPNet. And so, I mean, he doesn't like what we're doing either way, so he'll never co-sign it. And I think he's a really smart guy. I think he's a really smart guy. He's an experienced Bitcoin developer, and he has his own journey. He has his own morals. He has his own sort of vision for where Bitcoin's going to go. But we consulted him, and he was willing to give us this advice, and we built the protocol following his advice to try and make sure that the protocol doesn't damage Bitcoin in any way, because we want to be aligned with Bitcoin. Despite all the people who are hating on us for trying to do this on BTC, our goal is to provide value to Bitcoin. Our goal is to not be parasitic. Our goal is to not take liquidity away from Bitcoin. Our goal is to help Bitcoin long-term, and we don't want any aspect of our protocol to be damaging to BTC.
Well, Chad, everything that you've said here today makes me a lot more confident about the future of OPNet. Very, very happy that I had an opportunity to ask you questions in front of the hundreds and hundreds of people that are watching live right now. Thank you, man. This has been great, a lot of fun, and it was great to meet you.
Yeah, really a pleasure.
Yeah, it really was. And I appreciate you taking the time, because I know this was a little bit long, but